much longer do we have to live here on earth? None of us really know. We need to run this race as if today is the last day. I'm 73 this year, and so as far as I'm concerned, I'm on the last lap of my race. And that doesn't mean that I need to slow down. That doesn't mean I can sit back and say, oh, well, I've done this, I've done that. It doesn't work that way. I've been reading the last few days, once again, I've read it before, the book on Seabiscuit. So thoroughly enjoyed it again, I couldn't put it down. Story of seemingly 3 failures who came together. George Howard was a bicycle salesman, and sure, yes, in the end he became a very successful automobile tycoon. Smith, the guy who trained horses, was a recluse, was to all intents and purposes at times a failure. People, he would hardly speak. Red Pollock, the jockey, even although he started off well, by the time the 3 of them got together, he was a failure. He was a failure. And Howard bought a horse that was a failure. Even although this horse was from good lineage, he just wanted to sleep. He just wanted to eat and sleep. And so, excuse me, I've got a cold. And to me, it's one of those Cinderella stories. There are a few of them that happened during the Depression, after the Depression, at the crash of Wall Street, and people were discouraged. It was like God was saying, lift up your eyes. I specialize in failures. These 4 got together, and Seabiscuit became one of the most phenomenal racing horses ever. Breaking world records, breaking track records. And despite the fact that they were injured, and Red Pollock at times has said he was finished, at times has said Seabiscuit was finished, they would still rise up and do it. And that got me thinking about failures in the Bible. If you look at David's life, he started off on being nothing. He was a shepherd. And then he killed Goliath, and then he was the big hero. But then King Saul started persecuting him, and David fled, and he was hiding in caves. And eventually his family came to join him. But do you know what? If you read, it's in Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 22. Who were the people who came and joined themselves to David? They were discontented. They were people who were in debt. They were people who were failures. They couldn't make it anywhere else, and they came and they joined themselves to David. And out of that, my friends, out of that came the 300 mighty men, the 30 mighty men, the 3 mighty men. Men that were incredibly brave and amazing soldiers. And even if you look at the life of Paul, in my daily reading through the New Testament right now, I'm at Romans, and I'm telling you, I'm battling. I'm battling. Every time I pick up the Bible to read Romans, I said, Lord, I don't understand it. I understood the first few chapters, and now I'm starting to understand the last few chapters, but the middle part is so profound. And I say, Lord, this was written 2,000 years ago. And it's so deep and so profound. And yet if you look at Paul's life, let me read something to you, what he says in Corinthians. This is a man who God gave such amazing revelation that he said he was given a thorn in the flesh so that he wouldn't become proud. He said every time Paul went into a town or something, I'm sure people wouldn't have invited him to come and speak in their church because there would be a riot. He'd be stoned, beaten, thrown in prison. He said, from the Jews 5 times I received 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I've been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in the wilderness, in the sea, among false brethren, in weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. And so we just look, we are so conditioned by the world that we just want to be successful according to the world's standard. But what is the world's standard? Are we prepared to pay the price? I was reading recently again about Dimon Shakarian. I'm sure the younger generation would know who he was. I find God raises up one person for vision, with a vision for that generation. And when that generation's passed, it fades away and God raises up another person with another vision that's relevant to the next generation. So Dimon Shakarian came from Armenian, or his forefathers did, and he had a vision to start a Christian fellowship amongst businessmen. It was called the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship. And he tried and spent thousands of dollars to get this thing off the ground. He believed it was a vision God gave him. And it just wouldn't take off. Nothing was happening. And even his best friend who had walked along his side eventually said to me, "No, I don't think this is of the Lord." But the vision just wouldn't let him go. And his wife even came and said, "You know what, I think let it go, I don't think it's of God." And he was eventually on his knees and lying prostrate before the Lord, crying out to the Lord. And about 3 o'clock that morning he got up and just began to pray. And I think basically it was the death of a vision. And his wife came in, bless her heart. I think they're both with the Lord now. Started playing on the organ, and then God gave her a prophecy. Interesting, and during worship, how often a prophecy would come through. And she said, "God says this is of him." And the next morning, things began to change. And that doesn't mean when you're in that failure, if you think of David, how he eventually became king, and how the kingdom blossomed and prospered under him. But there are times when we go through failure. I like what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1, where he says to the Corinthians, none of us were noble, none of us were smart and clever and beautiful and rich, but God delights in taking what is foolishness to the world. And if we have to put in a nutshell what God thinks is success, what does God think is success? If he looks at me, what does he want? He wants my heart, he wants my obedience. And even as you're listening to this, you would say, "Oh yeah, but I love God." But how obedient are we? Are we obedient enough to make a fool of ourselves? Obedient enough to humble ourselves into the dust? God asks us to do that. That is the measure of someone who is successful in God's eyes. I can give you so many examples in God's kingdom. Gladys Aylward, who was rejected by the Bible College, who was the char. She was a domestic servant in England. Nobody wanted her, but she had a vision, and she loved God, and she was involved where she was. And she said, "Lord, I will go to China." And every week out of her wages, she used to go and pay for the train ticket that she had booked. And what a success story. What a successful story. 25 years in China, made a movie, eventually it sold, books are still selling on her life because she's gone to be with the Lord. So I think in the end it comes to total surrender. Let us pray. Lord, help us to look through the eyes of eternity. Help us, Lord, not to look at my own shortcomings, but to look at you and know you live in me. It's Christ in me, the hope of glory. You will do the work. I can't hinder you and hold you back according to my own shortcomings. You will bypass those things. And I just pray that we will put our hands in your hand and say, Lord, here it is. It's now all or nothing. We love you. Amen. Thank you, and may God bless you.